Hello there. It is inevitable. In order to maintain any status as a sovereign nation that we have left, we will, in the end, be forced to leave the unreformable ECHR. And this is where the wailing woke lefties pile in and claim that should we leave the ECHR, then all human rights in the UK would be eradicated and a permanent darkness would descend upon us. Forgetting that we had human rights embedded in our laws long before the European Convention on Human Rights was invented. And the ECHR was based a lot on our laws at the time anyway. But the ECHR is just another silo in the coordinated attempt across the globe to bring us all under one single legal and political United Nations style system. The one world government, if you will. Not by the front door of evident central control, but by the back door of a myriad of interconnected treaties and agreements that bind us all into the network. Does that sound and look familiar when viewing the UK of today compared to just a few decades ago? A network where godlike so-called experts tell us mere mortals what we can do, where we can go, when we can go there, what we can and can't eat or drink when we get there, and crucially, exactly what we can and cannot think or tolerate. Individual thoughts and actions will be forbidden. And this human rights thing is a part of all of this. The drive from the globalists or internationalists or whatever you want to call them is that anyone from anywhere has exactly the same rights, not just human but general rights, wherever they go in the world. The same rights and access to healthcare, accommodation, money, benefits, pensions, you name it. So a national community that builds itself a nice, prosperous society with generous rights that everyone agrees on has to have open borders so that everyone on the planet can enter and enjoy those same benefits, whether they pay in or not. The Global Migration Compact is an example of this. Although currently, but only currently, it is not binding, but it places demands on nations to facilitate mass global migration so that people can easily find the best place for them to live, by placing the onus on states to build a better life for the newcomers. The trouble is that our Western nations are the ones following all those non-binding demands. And when you give it a thought, isn't it strange that the international laws governing migration are followed to the minutest of details, while the human right to the freedom of expression is thrown under the bus while doing so? That's the truth about our internationally set, selective human rights regime, where some people's human rights are placed above those of others in order to pursue this internationalist agenda. And that is driven from the UN and the ECHR down through our Western Supreme Courts, with the aim of converting our countries from being prosperous, sovereign nations into global, communist, social services cash cows. Through things like these obscene calls for massive trillion-pound levels of so-called reparations, while trying to quietly whitewash the true history of the internal African slave trade out of existence. A slave trade that continues without the aid of the West to this day. And the rewriting of our history to lay the baseline legal ground for forcing it on us. Now, before I continue, please like, subscribe and comment below and join our channel membership. It all helps us to keep bringing you content like this. So as far as I'm concerned, if we want a prosperous and truly free UK society, we must leave the ECHR and at least suspend any treaties that get in the way of us maintaining that. Or we risk being submerged in a homogenised dystopian world of reverse human rights. Now, I've just found a very puzzling story, a story that seems to have ignited a bit of heated debate. And yes, it does have human rights at its core. It transpires that the co-op has decided to stock Palestinian beer on its shelves. And this comes hot on the heels of the company banning Israeli produce from their stores. And this has understandably created quite a storm of comment under the article in the Telegraph. Now, the basic facts are that the Tebe brewery based in the West Bank has joined together with a microbrewery company called Brewgooder to supply Co-op with these beverages, with the beers being brewed in Scotland and distributed under licence. Straight away there are calls for the beer, the Co-op and Brewgooder to be boycotted, with claims that Palestine is Muslim, so surely brewing beer like this, some of which have high alcoholic content by the way, is haram, i.e. against Sharia law. What's going on, etc, etc, etc. But it's much more complicated than that, because the Tabor brewery is situated in the village of Tabor, in the West Bank, in so-called Palestine. And the village of Tabor is proudly, wait for it, it's proudly Christian. That's right, it's the last Christian village in Palestine. What a dilemma. Now, I'm not calling out rights and wrongs here, just telling it as it is. Do we condemn the Christians there for the Hamas atrocities and boycott them? Do we assume the Christians will be funding Hamas by the back door, despite Hamas controlling Gaza and the Palestinian Authority exercising only partial civil control over the West Bank? Or do we support the brewery in the hope Christianity will blossom in Palestine? And I do worry that should the West Bank come under full Islamist control, how long would that last remaining Christian village be brewing beer, and how much longer would it actually exist? But remember that it was the village of Tabor that extremist, allegedly Jewish settlers very recently targeted with some rather aggressive antisocial behaviour. So the picture on the ground is always far more complicated than it appears. Do the Christians have the human right to live there and brew beer there, whatever the Islamists or the Israelis say? If so, how will these human rights be enforced? We in the UK are lucky to live in a relatively powerful, sovereign and prosperous nation which can, with the right political will, remain just that. Finally, please like, subscribe and comment below, and a big shout out to our Patreon supporters and channel membership. And thank you for watching.